Good afternoon, folks. Sarush here. Hope everyone's doing well. Joining me today is a dear friend and a dear partner, Mr. Peter Michael Marino, joining us today from New York City. Peter, I have so much to ask you. You've been, as a part of the Eventcombo family for I think 2 years, and give or take, time flies, right? And we've always interacted on email. We've communicated for your events, and I always was curious about you because I know you're a performer. I know you've been in theater for years, and I was always curious about who is Peter behind the events that we've had on the platform. So I wanted to meet with you. I wanted to get to know you better. I wanted our audience to get to know you better, and I wanted to discuss a wide array of things around theater, around performing arts, where it's been over the last year, where it is now, and kind of like where it's going. So number one, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy, so really I'm grateful to you. Tell us who Peter is and how, the origin story, if you will. I know. Pretty heavy stuff today, right, Peter? You weren't expecting that.
I think I've actually been working with you for maybe 4 years.
Oh my God! Wow!
I think like shortly after you started, our mutual friend Chris Harcum recommended you, and I was doing a festival, and I was looking for a platform that worked for festivals with different shows at different times, and
wow,
Eventcombo, the name itself said that's the one, and I asked you some questions, and I was like, oh, this is like someone who actually cares. So I've been unable to work with anyone else. So my origin story is I am born, bred, raised in New York City, grew up in Queens. I went to college for theater design, actually, and then wound up kind of getting more involved in acting and directing. And I've kind of done, I think, almost everything, which might be a good thing, might not be. I mean, I've dabbled in, in theater, obviously, musical theater. I've written musicals. I've performed in musicals. Did a lot of improvisation, cabaret shows. Very little film, very little television, but lots of public access television, and somehow managed to bring my shows to theaters all around the world. Used the Edinburgh Festival Fringe in Edinburgh, Scotland as like a launching pad for a lot of my stuff going back to 2012. And that kind of opened my eyes to all the possibilities of what you can do with theater and the different ways that you can share your ideas in a non-traditional form. And that sort of led me to more producing. And then that led me to like understanding how marketing and publicity and press releases all work. So I've been running workshops on those things for many, many, many years. And then I taught a lot. I taught sketch comedy at Pace University for 3 years and William Patterson University, taught solo show classes for the Pit for 1,000 years, created a bunch of solo festivals, a bunch of political festivals, and a bunch of Edinburgh type festivals here in the States. I am totally exhausted now, actually, just thinking about what I have done, and it shows.
Please, no, not at all, Peter. Again, I knew this breadth of background, if you will, and thanks for reminding me. It's been 4 years. Time certainly flies. That's amazing, and I'm very grateful to you, Peter, for the positivity and everything that you do, and the background that you just described. I think there's a distinction between someone just getting started in the arts, if you will, and someone like yourself who's been in the arts for a number of years, and I think it's experience, right? But kind of relating that to now what's happened over the last year, you coming from the same world I do in terms of the in-person world, where you can touch and feel and really engage in individually, coming from that world, pivoting into what happened last year, obviously COVID. Peter, tell me, and I kind of saw you literally go through that transition. I experienced it for myself, but I also experienced it through you, because you were doing in-person shows, sold out shows you've done throughout the country, and and then you pivoted into virtual with your performances. So two things come to mind, Peter. Number one, on a personal level, what were you going through when you were like, holy smokes, my in-person shows are not going to be possible right now. So what was that personal reflection for you like? And then kind of walk us through how you translated that into your professional works, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's very weird. I sort of go back to 9/11 because that was like the first big tragedy, I suppose, that affected the city that I lived in. I was not here for any other major tragedy. I mean, I've been here for blackouts, and I've been here for, well, I don't even think riots. I mean, 9/11 was a big thing. And for some crazy reason, maybe it's just always been in my DNA, I just jumped into action right away. I mean, I was like down at ground zero for 2 months, hosing off, firefighters' boots, and working for the Red Cross. And I just felt like I had to, I don't know, something told me to do something. And I did without thinking about it. And the same thing happened with the pandemic. I mean, none of us knew how long it was going to last, but it did seem like pretty bad when they were shutting things down in New York City. Honestly, there was no game plan at all. I had a show. I had one show that I had just done a week before when we were literally going to the theater and going, oh, there's this thing going on. I guess we're okay. And that script was on my desk. And I just saw people, just constantly posting about this new thing that was happening to the world. And I guess my instinct is to always make people feel better. So I was like, well, I'm just going to do my show on a computer and see what happens. And there I'm like Googling like platforms for doing shows live, and then this new thing called Zoom showed up. And I was amazed that like people really liked listening to a story from their computer. Then I had the children's show. Oh, and also I was getting audiences from around the world. I used to have to go to Edinburgh, Scotland, which is an international festival, to show my work to people from around the world. But this pandemic allowed me to show it to people very, very easily. So that was encouraging. And I was sort of making an income, which was very encouraging. So I was doing a show on stage called Show Up Kids, which is an incredibly interactive show where kids are literally helping me put on a show. They're coming up on stage. They're handing around props and costumes and set pieces. They're passing an iPad around the audience. That's not going to work in a digital format. And actually, it's never going to work as far as I'm concerned. We have now completely cut all of that out of the show. So you still have to make it interactive. And McCole, my director, and I worked very hard on figuring out how many people can you have at a time? How can you shut their microphones on and off? How can you make everyone feel like they're a part of the show? And it actually improved the show. It actually, we're looking forward to reopening the show in person this weekend because we have this whole new set of tools in our toolbox to play with. Yeah.
And so I know, you had set up a series of shows out of your living room, right? And I remember, I think this was April or May, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, oh my God, I'm really curious to see how this pans out. And number one, we didn't notice any, droppage in terms of attendance. We didn't notice any type of, issues that we were expecting as a result of the shift. So, 100% you were successful in that transition, right?
Well, you were very helpful, and you were helpful in that transition because we had to figure out this new way to let audiences know where to go to see a show that was not a physical location.
Right.
So I know you made a lot of adjustments.
Right. I'm recollecting now, Peter. I was saying you're just being nice and give me a compliment, but the email to attendees, that communication part was critical because obviously attendees also were adapting, right? The audience didn't know how to embrace the experience that they were signing up for. So it was really exciting. It was scary, but it was really, really exciting as far as that whole interaction went. So really, I was super impressed with how you accomplished all of that. So Peter, having done what you've done now, what are your plans for Show Up Kids is happening this upcoming week in person. Are you planning any hybrid experiences? Are you planning on doing both now? Are you doing virtual for some shows and in person in some shows? Like, what does your event roadmap look like in terms of production?
Yes, to all of that. It's yes. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to answer this question. So my other show is a toy theater show called Planet of the Grapes, which is, you're watching the whole show right on your screen on a tiny, tiny stage. So when you're looking at it on your TV, it looks like a big stage. The whole show is set up to feel like you're in a theater. There's the sound of an audience. There's an intermission. There's a program. There's all these things that make it feel like you're actually in a real theater. We developed this thing months and months ago, not knowing that people would actually be going to real theaters. But it still works as a different type of entertainment. Like you get sick of watching Game of Thrones, you throw this on for an hour, and experience something different. So then Show Up Kids, when Show Up Kids goes back on stage, we're not doing this right away, but eventually the audience will be able to watch the show from home and hear the audience responding in the room. And then we want to be able to get a kid from, Alaska to participate in the show.
Right.
So the performer will still be using the computer to, ask them questions, and then their answers will come in. And then that kid feels like they're a part of a show in New York City, which I think is really cool. Yep. It expands our audience. It certainly helps with accessibility for people who just can't come to New York, or people who live in New York who just can't get out of the house for whatever reason. I mean, that's what I think this pandemic has taught so many arts makers is you need to make your stuff accessible in every way possible. We always just showed up at our theater and did our shows. And I think we're all rethinking all of that stuff. I mean, as a matter of fact, Show Up Kids during pandemic, I had it translated into Spanish because that makes it more accessible. Yeah. So we did like a couple of performances in Spanish online. And then we decided to use the same performer and do it in Spanish on stage. So she is doing the show on stage on Saturday in Spanish and the whole month of June in Spanish. Then, since that went well, we had it translated into Japanese. So in July, a performer named Kent Marita is going to do the show on Saturdays in Japanese and on Sundays in English. Look, it's thanks to a great grant that we got from the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council. Again, I don't think I ever would have had the time to apply for a grant, because if anyone out there is listening and has done it, it takes weeks to figure out exactly what you're asking for and why it's important. I never would have done it not during pandemic, because I just keep myself busy with other things. But we all had a lot of extra time during pandemic. So the grant really helped. What's great about it, I think, is not only is the show accessible because it's now in different languages, but I'm no longer in the show. So when kids come to the show, they're seeing a non-white person doing the show. And I think that automatically is exciting and encouraging, and lets kids know that you can be anybody and do anything in this world. You don't have to look like the person on stage.
Right. But it's so powerful, Peter. I don't think this would have happened if not for the pandemic, right? I mean, Japanese, Spanish, and you might start doing it in German and Hindi, and so much potential there. And I just realized something. So you've created, and tell me if I'm wrong, you've got Planet of the Grapes, you've got Show Up Kids. What other brands have you created in the last couple of years, similar to that type of scale?
Well, the show that I started pandemic with, and then a weird thing to say, but it's true. The show I started pandemic with is a show called Desperately Seeking the Exit, which is my one-man show, storytelling show, where I tell the story of how I wrote a musical that was on the West End that was a big flop. So it's a story about hope and a story about failure, and it's a story about rising from the ashes. Ironically, that show which was written in 2007. It closed in London in 2007 after about 3 months. And then it was translated into Japanese and opened in Tokyo a year later. And it was a big hit there.
No way.
So I now have 2 shows that have been translated into Japanese, which is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool, Peter. By the way, have you been to Japan or you?
Yeah. I went,
Japan, right? Okay, good.
I went to see it, and believe me, I am doing everything I can to make sure that Show Up Kids goes to Tokyo with Kent Morita, and I'm in the passenger seat next to him.
That's amazing, Peter. So much potential with these brands you've created, and it's high quality content, right? At the end of the day, so many questions for you, but I might go off topic with those questions, so I'll try to keep it on point. Peter, so you've embraced everything digital now, right? You're all inclusive in terms of utilizing technology and your, what you've been successful at, which is in-person theater, right? Where do you think the industry is headed? So we know what Peter's doing. What do you think the industry is going to be doing? Are they going to be complementing what you just said, or do you see it heading in a different direction? I'm talking about Broadway. I'm talking about off-Broadway, off Broadway. What's your insight into that?
Well, the Young Vic in London just announced 2 weeks ago that all of their shows are going to be live streamed in real time. So you don't have to go to, I actually went to London 3 years ago to see my friend in a show at the Young Vic. That cost me about $2,000. If she's in a show again at the Young Vic, I can watch it from my house for about $20. It's a lot better. Exactly. And I think a lot of other organizations are going to jump on board with that. In the States, it's a little different because our unions, Screen Actors Guild, SAG-AFTRA, which is basically the movie and radio and television unions, and then the Stage Actors Union, Actors Equity, this is all new for them as well. So they are still trying to figure out, well, what is this contract called? Contracts are usually based on how many performances, how many people are seeing it, for how long is it happening. Well, with this, right, you could have 2 people, you could have 300 people. You just don't know until you do it. When it says a lot of folks have said, why are you putting a cap on the number of people that can see your show? Well, for several reasons. One, if there's more than 100 people, it's really hard for the screen manager to answer questions and do all that. 2, if it's a published piece of work, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that show for that many people. So you do have to put a cap on it. And I'm sure there's number 3. I just can't think of it right now. I know that I am 100% sure that the smaller artists, the independent artists, the ones who are writing for grants during pandemic and not receiving tons of donations from wealthy patrons are the ones who are going to embrace this first. I watched a show a few weeks ago. Mike Daisy was the first live show in New York City at the Crane Theater downtown that 12 people were in the audience, distanced all away from each other. And we were at home listening and watching the show and hearing the audience responding to that person's show. Wow. It was actually really exciting, and I didn't have to leave my house, and I feel like I experienced something with other people. I experienced theater. There's a lot of discussion about what is theater? I ran into that. People just saying, well, what you're doing isn't theater. Well, why? It's literally an adaptation of a theater play. It's happening in real time with an audience that's watching it and responding to it in real time. Right. What else is it? It's theater. Right. And Planet of the Grapes is quite literally theater. It is happening on a stage. We're kind of, we're paying homage to the toy theater movement of the Victorian era. I never knew about the Victorian era toy theater movement, but that was people would go to see a show and they loved the show. So they'd go to the concession stand and what do? We buy a t-shirt. What did they do? They bought a toy theater in a little box. They got home, they put it all together. They recreated it for their family and friends. Toy theater brought theater into people's homes. The pandemic brought theater into people's homes. I think it's very interesting that those things are connected.
100%. It's been nothing but growth, forced growth. I think it's been forced, right? I mean, no one, voluntarily did anything. I think it was all based on demand and survival, right? But what I've seen, right, and what I've seen, Peter, is nothing but positivity and inclusiveness and connectivity and access. All of those things have been realized as a result of a very, very nasty virus. It's such an amazing dynamic, right? All the goodness that's come out of it. I've seen families get closer, and I've seen folks discover new talents and new art forms and things like that. So it's really, really positive. Peter, on the opposite note, any regrets? Any like bad experiences that you've had from a professional standpoint throughout COVID? Whether a production didn't work out or anything like that. I'm curious because no doubt I've seen all the positivity, but I'm wondering if you had any significant challenge that you also came out of, or has it all been smooth sailing, right?
I mean, anybody. No. Anybody who's attended a digital event knows that there's always some kind of bug. I mean, look, you and I had a bug right in the beginning of this. Like, oh, right, I got to plug that in. Yeah. We've been doing this for 14 months now, but there's still bugs. Yep. I think there's still, I don't think people really knew until pandemic that they had what's called a spam folder. Right. Right? Like, oh, I could be getting my link.
That's right.
I really don't think anybody knew. Gosh, I can't think of anything negative. I certainly say there were challenges. Yes. I mean, when you're like a pioneer doing this stuff, thanks to companies like you who help make buying tickets easy, you get a little bit of press because you're doing something new. But then the big boys start picking up on what you're doing, and then they get the press because that's always how it is. It makes sense. Like people read newspapers and magazines because they want to read about things they know about, I think, rather than things they don't know about. And publishers and journalists and newspapers certainly want to publish articles about high status projects and people. That's what gets eyeballs. So it's been a challenge to stand out in the crowd. It became a challenge to stand out in what became a very crowded place. I also think that a lot of folks jumped on the I'm just going to do my show digitally bandwagon without having thought about lighting or sound or where to look. I mean, how many times did you watch shows where people were kind of just not looking at the camera, right. And I feel like in a weird way, I mean, I might get in trouble for this, but or maybe it sounds like I have a lot of bravado, but I'm very proud of what we did because we worked extremely hard on it to make it professional, like you do in a real show. I think a lot of those early attempts turned people off. So it was hard to say, like, it's online, but it's good. It's online, like Planet of the Grapes. What I love about Planet of the Grapes is it's on, we do it through StreamYard onto YouTube Live on a private channel. So one of my things is you can wear whatever you want. Like no one's going to see you and no one's going to see you. I'm not going to see you. You're not going to see anybody else, which is a plus. The minus is like, I'm doing a show to nobody. Like I don't know until the show is over. And I read the comments that there were 50 people going, this is hilarious. I love this part. I'm going to tell my friends about this. In the real world, you do a show and then like you meet everybody in the lobby and then like you go for dinner or drinks afterwards. There's a way to wind down and to get feedback, positive and negative feedback. I mean, we can only grow as artists if we are open to accepting all kinds of feedback, at least open to listening to it. And even better if we're open to doing something with that information we're getting. So that's been a big challenge, and it still is a big challenge. I try now to like make sure I have a phone date or I'm going to see another show right after my show. Otherwise I'm just bouncing off the walls. It's very challenging.
Yeah, no, everything you said, again, totally on point. We experienced it firsthand. As far as people jumping on the bandwagon, poor quality productions, we saw that. A little bit of it was new folks, participating in this world. The other part of it was just not being prepared. It's interesting to see that still going on in some aspects where, like you just said, hugging in a wire, right? People are still, we're still not 100% used to it. I guess, it's a matter of familiarity and practice, but we're still seeing that, Peter, just for reference sake. It's, and I think we're going to continue seeing it because even one thing, and I don't know if you agree or disagree, but one thing that I noticed, having done a lot of events on the platform, is virtual events are no different than in-person events. They both require a lot of pre-production, a lot of preparedness, practice. And if you don't do that in virtual, you're not going to get away with it. Just like if you don't do that in person, you're not going to get away with it. And one thing that I noticed was some folks not practicing, not doing any pre-prod work, coming into the platform, and then expecting everything to just magically work. And I think hard lesson learned, right? Hard lesson learned. But hopefully, that continues to decrease, and we see more, professionalism and practice folks getting into it. But this is really, really great.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, for you, was fireworks ever a thought 2 years ago?
Oh my God, Peter. It was not, it totally was not, right?
It just seems so obvious now, right?
Exactly. Now, and we were talking about it the other day, and we were thinking, exactly what you just asked. We're like, again, me and you just discussed this. If not for the pandemic, this would not have, come to fruition. And it's just another example of how, again, very, very nasty virus. Many people lost their lives, and families were impacted. I lost 2 aunts to it, by the way, Peter. So, it hit home, but so many good things came out of it, right? From a holistic standpoint. So yeah, fireworks is one of them. It was not even on our radar until post-pandemic, and we're like, oh, wait a minute, this is a great idea, and here it is. But no, absolutely, Peter. Peter, as we conclude, and I want to talk to you for the next week, man. I love.
We will. Don't worry.
I absolutely. I'm a big fan, Peter, and I love you, man. I appreciate the energy and the positivity. You are absolutely amazing, and it's good to have you in my life and my network. Peter, so you just spoke about the next week and what's coming up in the near future. What are the plans for the next 6 months, for the 1 year? If you can share that, I'm curious. So. And if you can't share it, it's all good. But I'm curious about what you're thinking 6 months ahead or a year ahead, right?
Yeah. It's funny. After like the first week of Planet of the Grapes, I had people go, I wasn't able to make it. Are you going to do it again? Mm-hmm. And my response was, why would I work for 9 months on something just to do it 4 times? Mm. That's not, I don't know. It's just not how I don't know if anyone operates like that. That's a lot of time. No, I actually just said to a fellow fringe performer, this is my show for the next 2 years. This is what I'm doing. Nice. This show never would have come into my brain if it were not for this thing that we're looking at now. Mm-hmm. The next step for Planet of the Great, well, we know what the next step is for Show Up Kids. And Spanish, Japanese, and English, Tokyo, take over the world. The next step for Planet of the Grapes is to take this digital experience and move it to the stage so that the audience is watching me manipulate the puppets on a tiny stage, which you don't get to see in the real show. You don't get the behind the scenes, which, by the way, I probably will be talking to you about setting up a ticketing platform for that, because some people have actually gone, I want to see what you're doing because I'm all in black. You just see the stuff moving. You don't see me. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good income stream right there. Mm-hmm. So you'll see me in one corner doing it. Then in the center of the stage will be a big video screen showing what normally you would see on a small screen at home. Mm-hmm. And then the other side will be the composer. By the way, I've never hired a composer to write music for any of my toy theater shows because this is the first time. So he'll be playing music live. And I think, and then that whole thing will be available to watch at home as well as in the theater.
Nice.
So the benefits are I get to hear a live audience responding to the show. The audience gets to hear live music and watch a theater artist creating and watch the result of that creation. And hopefully it's the kind of show that can play anywhere. So that's what we want to do. I think technical.
It looked like it was about to attack you, Peter.
Yeah, it is. I think we're creating 4-dimensional theater, and I'm saying that I've said it on one or two other. I'm saying it on every podcast I'm on because I want it to be in the record books that I think I'm creating 4-dimensional theater.
Love it, Peter. Love it. That ties directly into. We've been promoting this word physical and digital, right? Phygital, and it's true. You definitely are. And I think, I used the reference brand intentionally earlier with you, Peter. You're creating some great brands that have longevity, right? And that's what you just described with Planet of the Grapes. I think in-person, virtual, 2-3 more additional layers of experience on top of it, behind the scenes and everything like that. It's so powerful. There's a seating component. There's so much to it. I'm really excited, Peter. I'm looking forward to the next frontier with you, and I know you're going to continue entertaining and awing your audiences. Any parting words, Peter? Anything else you want to share?
Well, I would love it if some company like you figured out how you can make what we're watching on the screen look 3-dimensional. Like that Facebook feature where you can make a photo look 3-dimensional. That would be amazing. That would be like a whole new. I don't know if I don't know how old you are, but we used to have a thing when I was younger called ViewMaster. You look through it and look at these little scenes.
I am old enough to remember that, Peter.
Great.
I had a ViewMaster. Yeah, those things. Okay, you always lost the discs on those, right? I don't know where the discs and the slides went for those. I remember having a ViewMaster and then wondering, where are all the slides?
I think we gave them away. I'll give you my Winnie the Pooh for your haunted house.
Right.
So, they always had this weird 3-dimensional otherworldly look. That would be great. Yep. So that's not really a parting word. That's a request. Parting words is I don't know. Just try to say yes to your ideas, no matter how crazy they seem. Right. That's what you all did from when you created the company, and then you did it again and again and again, and you made things happen. And the same thing. I mean, one of the messages of Show Up Kids, the premise of Show Up Kids, is that somebody is helping someone out put on a show, and then the star of the show is not there, so the person has to put on a show, but they don't know anything about putting on a show or kids or anything. And it's about kind of doing things that scare you, as opposed to just not doing things because they scare you. Right. So that's my advice is if it sounds impossible, try it, and don't try it alone. Right. Collaborate with everybody and anybody you can.
Amazing. Peter, those are two of my biggest mottos, right? Is always say yes, and always collaborate. I love that you said that. There's a reason why we get along so well. We share the same principles. I think 100%. I've always said yes to everything. Very rarely do I say no, unless it involves me putting my life on the line. I'm always going to say yes. And I believe in collaboration and working. One person can only do so much, but more than one person, you can drastically advance, right? So love that you said that. That was really, really beautiful. I think we're going to coach you on both those points.
Great,
Peter. This has been so fun. Look forward to seeing your next show. Look forward to having your next event on the platform. And we'll continue following you on Twitter. And looking forward to everything, Peter. Stay safe out there, right?
You too. Thank you so much. Keep up the good work.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you.